And it always comes to the same thing. A lot of people are always saying, the people that live there, grew up there, know the traditions, always say the same thing, that these weren't built by us, they were built by the gods. And it's really amazing.
Billy Carson is sharing powerful knowledge that the world's elite would prefer to keep hidden, revealing secrets about the fundamental nature of the universe and life-changing conventional understanding and control. You are watching Vision Unveil.
So many people aren't aware of this information. I think that's one of the things that we're trying to correct now. And Billy and I doing this work is that we're trying to point out and say, hey, look, we have evidence that directly tells us where all these things came from, tells us who we really are, tells us this lost history. And we're now at the point where we're trying to put those pieces together to understand it.
Absolutely, and that's huge because that gives us an idea of where the very first city was here on Earth, and where these kings or these gods, quote unquote, kind of kickstarted civilization here. I really think it was like a breakaway civilization from their planet to here. You can detect when we've had global warming in the past, and then you begin to see this cycle that it happens every so many thousands of years. You begin to see the cycle of every so many thousands of years, you get an ice age. You begin to see the cycle of every so many thousands of years, you get some type of a geological disaster that happens on the planet. You can see the different oxygen levels, different atmospheric gases of the plant life. All that information is in the ice core. So, I mean, literally, when you study these ice cores, you can now then predict the future of the planet. And to be honest with you, a lot of people are really getting worried about the global warming and everything else. We're right on track with the ice core said we were going to be exactly right now. This is not something, to be honest with you, out of the ordinary. It's actually something that's part of our cyclical nature of this geological pattern on this planet. But the amazing thing is those ice cores line up with these ancient tablets, which is why I talk about the fact that I really believe that the Great Sphinx and the Great Pyramid are probably about 36,000 years old. Because if you go back 2 additional precessional periods to match up the Sphinx with the constellation of Leo, you end up around 36,000 years ago, when according to the ice cores and according to the Emerald tablets, it's a perfect time to build the Giza Plateau, to build a Great Pyramid. So it kind of really it helps you paint a good picture about what's going on. And the other thing is, like you said, finding these tablets all around the world. Chief Joseph, which was a Native American Indian that was unburied in North America, was unburied from a burial tomb in North America, and what was in his pocket? A Sumerian tablet written in cuneiform text. So the Sumerians had contact with indigenous and Native Americans thousands of years ago in the North Americas, proving again that they had traveled the entire globe. They also found in Mesoamerica, Sumerian writing, which they call Proto-Sumerian, but that's even on Wikipedia. I mean, anybody can look it up. They even had a metric system back then. So when I tell people about, the fact that the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid is the longitude, the numbers match the speed of light by meters per second. Well, people go, oh no, we didn't have meters back then. Oh yes, we did. They had meters thousands of years ago. Everything we have now is just a rediscovery.
Exactly, that's really well said. And we're going to be getting into some of those pieces of evidence from other parts of the world that prove that there was this global civilization and global connection that once occurred around the planet that was completely destroyed and wiped out. And Billy, you made some excellent points there. And I want to address a couple of them. Right now, yes, we're going through another one of these time periods. This cyclical nature time period. Don't allow the media to distract you and confuse you over what's going on right now. Oh, this warming that's occurring on the earth, completely just human induced, nothing to worry about. We're just going to fix things up, cool things down. We'll be all set, except for the fact that we're right in line with another one of these cycles that I think is based on solar cycles that occur where you get extreme warming and then a period of extreme cooling over and over and over again. And in between each one of those events, you get a disaster. Now, how big that disaster is going to be depends on a lot of factors, especially if you have an ice age. And that's why I want to both remind people that that's why this information is so important to learn right now, because we're in this window where we have all of this available to us and we don't know how long that window is going to be. And secondly, thankfully, this is the part where I go the positive direction on this discussion, is that we don't have an ice age right now. And that's something that a lot of people, it gets past and they say, oh my God, these events that occurred back then, they're going to be just as bad right now. Well, they sort of can't be, because without that ice age and having 1 to 2 miles of ice above where I'm sitting right now, talking to you, you're not going to have that massive outburst of water that flooded, which is what was one of the major components, I believe, behind what they describe as being the Great Deluge. Now, I do think that there is earthquake and volcanic activity that occurs as well, and I'm not going to poo-poo the idea that we're not going to have challenges that are going to be coming up in our future. But we just have to understand and really look back at these events in history and then learn from them and try to figure out if we're going to go the same route that these ancient civilizations did and disappear, or if we're going to be able to stand the test of time and our civilization is going to continue. And so that's why we're at a crossroads right now, because we need to understand that the Maya, the Aztec, the Hopi, the Hindu, the Cherokee, and then many, many other ancient cultures around the world, they clearly state in their ancient writings and in their stories, they say that human civilization today is either the third or the fourth epoch that we've had in our past. That means that human civilizations have gone through these cycles of rising up and then being destroyed over and over again. And we're at the third or fourth of those time periods. And that's pretty mind-blowing to wrap your head around and consider, I think, Billy, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. It tells you that we're in a grand cycle, just like the Indians talk about, the native, not the Native American Indians, but the Indians in the East, when they're talking about these grand cycles of the yugas and the rise and fall of civilizations. The nature of this universe is cyclical, and the rise and fall of civilizations is cyclical. When Thoth talks about this in the Emerald Tablets, where he talks about the fact that he's actually traveled to other planets to watch civilizations rise and fall. So we're not the only ones that go through this situation. According to Thoth, this happens all throughout the entire universe. Civilizations have this cyclical nature to them where they rise and fall. So we're not the exception. The same thing happens here. And we're living, you brought up a very good point, we're living in a very small window of opportunity here where we're able to enjoy this planet, enjoy the beauty of nature, to flourish, and really it's a shame when you see this when you can really understand how small this window is. It's smaller than a blink of an eye. It's quicker than a blink of an eye.
Geologically time-wise,
yeah. So we're here and we're battling each other and fighting each other and we're pulling each other apart. We should be spending this little bit of precious time that we have to love each other, to show unconditional love to your brother and your sister, to unite, to make, and maybe even to find a way, if we join up, to break this cycle, or maybe travel the stars and do things that we have an opportunity to do while we have this window of opportunity here before the next geological disaster. And it's not to be negative. It's just that it's just part of life. Just like your avatar body is born and it grows up and it lives, and when it wears out, it passes on. The same thing happens, in these windows where you have the areas where the galactic space is clear of debris and planets can prosper and grow and develop life. And then there's times where that doesn't happen anymore for a short period of time. So we've got to be happy with what we have here. And we got to really start to love each other and enjoy the opportunity, this window of opportunity that we do have on this planet. That I believe that there's micro changes of, that organisms are capable of, but the macro changes, like what they're describing in this evolution to go from a monkey to a human being, it would take, probably billions of years. Even just a 2% variance, which is the difference between us and a chimpanzee, that 2% variance literally takes multi-millions of years if they were to quote unquote be real macro evolution. And so I really do believe, after looking at the research, after analyzing information in biology having to do with chromosome number 2 being fused in the human genome, having the telomere caps put on the end of chromosome number 2, and mainstream geneticists have said, this had to be done in a laboratory. They said it out their own mouths. They've written this down. This is well known, but they can't say who did it, but they can tell you it seems to happen around 200,000 years ago. Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that the same age we gave? If you add up all of the dates for the reigns of these cities, you get just over 200,000 years ago, which would fall in line with the first city ever created, and this whole biblical story with Adam and Eve and the creation of man, right?
Absolutely.
So you start to take these biblical stories, right, that we think are all just myth, and then you take these direct evidence from these cuneiform tablets, and then you take all this genetic data and you look at all of it on this holistic viewpoint, and all of a sudden you start to see that the story of what we've been told about who we are is extremely antiquated, biased, and inaccurate. And I actually go one step further to say that it was deliberately chosen. See, Darwin, if you look into Darwin and you look into his theories, he wrote confidently, he stated, and this is something that a lot of people don't bring up, is that he expected that his theories were going to be disproved in the future. He said that. He said that. He expected his theories to be disproved in the future because he saw holes in his logic. And he saw holes in what he was seeing around him, and he knew that. I know I really I hammer on Darwin pretty bad, but the more you look at it, the more you can actually see that Darwin didn't even, like I said, he didn't even think that his theories were going to be something that stood the test of time. But what happened is religion and other organizations grabbed onto Darwin because they said, here is something we can use.
Yeah.
What happens if human beings could view their existence as an ape? You know what I mean, Billy?
Absolutely.
If someone perceives themselves as just an ape, and that brain is created, and that consciousness is created by the brain, Billy, I'm going to ask you, how would that change both what we do here and our perspective in the universe?
Well, if somebody thought that they really came from apes and that consciousness comes from the brain, it would limit you. Because now you have a limited viewpoint of where you came from and how you got to this point. I think that if you, that really locks you into the religious system. I think that if people would understand that we were seeded on this planet and then a little much later genetically modified, maybe even again by these Anunnaki beings or these Atlantean beings at some point according to the ancient texts, but understanding that consciousness is not created in the brain, that consciousness is downloaded from the source. And I think that that will really expand people's mentality to understand that they're a part of something much bigger than this simple evolutionary type of a fairy tale, but they're really part of the God divine energy that's flowing through the entire universe. And that the same divine energy that is creating everything that we consider to be matter in the third dimension and reality in the third dimension is the same divine energy flowing through and coursing through their veins. You know, there was a study, a scientific study done where they took people and they put them in rooms and they put them in dark rooms and they put these electrodes on their head, connected them to a computer. They wanted to see what people's brain electronically looked like on a computer after looking at specific images so they can see how the brain reacts to information and digital information and images. Well, they found out something amazing by accident. So they spaced these images 10 seconds apart. They would put up something like a serene image of a lake view or ocean, a bed of roses, then a horrific scene like somebody getting murdered or stabbed or shot, and then a weird scene like kind of in the middle, like a building on fire and things like that. So all of a sudden what started happening is the data readout on the computer started telling the computer what the next image was going to be up to 7 seconds in advance. So that proves that we're getting a download of information from the future or from maybe real time, and we're not living in real time. So again, the brain doesn't create consciousness, it downloads it. Every case study they did, it worked out the same way. After a few minutes, the human brain was picking up the next image and transmitting it to the computer before the image showed up on the screen. Every case study they did. So this is how powerful we truly are. Our brain has billions of magnetite crystals. We download information directly from space-time, and we bring it into our reality tunnel so that we can operate within it. But that's a whole other point of view that they don't really want us to know. They want us to keep us very locked in and focused on, you know, ape to human and 6,000 years and all this other kind of crazy stuff. But the true reality is we are much bigger and much more important than this evolutionary fairy tale that's been taught.
That's right. And that's really well said, Billy. I could not agree more. What I wanted to say in regards to that is one of the examples I give that I talk about a lot is human beings right now perceive themselves as just this animal, right? Just this advanced animal. And it's like they're in this giant fenced in pen. And they're all going to work and they're all doing what they're told, and they live generally these very mundane lives. You know, we just come home, we watch TV, we go out for a hike every once in a while, we go out to do something, but largely our lives are very uneventful. And then before we die, that's why the regrets of most people is that they never really did anything. Okay. Now, so that's this farm of conformity that we talk about, where the perception of reality that's been created here is not simply just based on some scientist that created it and that's what all the evidence says, so we're going to go along with that. It's actually a paradigm to control our consciousness and how we perceive reality here. Because we're about to read some cuneiform tablets that completely contradict what we're told, and you're going to see how this mindset could control human civilizations. So getting back, before we start that, I want to bring up a point, getting back to this farm of conformity. Those animals that are in that farm, doing what they're doing on a daily basis, going to some dead-end job and wasting all their energy and time, and then they die and they wonder what they spent all their time doing. If those animals, and I use that term animal as just an example, because we're not really animals at all, are we? But if those animals realize that they're not farm animals at all, and that they're actually this incredible being that doesn't belong caged at all, it belongs, doesn't belong having its wings clipped. It belongs out, expanding consciousness and reaching the infinite stars and all these things, whereas the complete opposite is happening right now. And when you discover the truth, and when you read these ancient translations and tablets, and when you look at all this data, it's like finding a hole in that fence and running away and never coming back ever again. But the challenge that I put to every single person here, and I bring this up in my previous book, the challenge, and it goes along with Plato's cave, that the idea that everyone's trapped by these illusions, is that when you break out of that pen and you run away and the sun is basking on you and you're free, the challenge then becomes you have to come back. You have to come back and save the rest of the animals that are in that farm, or they're not going to make it out. And that collective of humanity is going to go down that road that other civilizations did, and we're going to be wiped out, and we're going to disappear and become a myth just like they did, because we're not learning the fundamental lessons we need to right now to make changes and reach the next level of our consciousness. So on that note, Billy, let's go into what actually says in these tablets and discusses it.
Okay.
And so we're going to be starting with what's called the Enuma Elish, and I know it's very dear to your heart, Billy, because it's one of the ones that I know you talk about among the most of all. And the Enuma Elish was found in the Ashurbanipal Library, as I mentioned, in 1849. And there's been many translations and different versions of it that have been brought up. And I want to also just mention before we bring that up that it may be amazing for some to read and understand that you'll read one version of the Enuma Elish, then you'll read another version like the Babylonian version. You'll notice that they're different. Yeah. What I just want to bring up is that there is a competition among these gods for who created mankind and who can get credit for being their savior and their great father. And so if you read Babylonian versions of what we're about to read right now, you find out that it says that Marduk created mankind. Okay. Right. And we can get into and talk about that as well, but it's this competition for who can be the savior, who could be the great creator of our species. So in the version we're going to be reading, it's a version that came out of Nineveh, and it's the version that I feel is the most accurate. And it was translated by great translators like Stephanie Dalley and George Smith, some of the best that have been out there. And so the Enuma Elish starts by saying, in this, from where we're going to begin, it says, "They bound him, holding him before Ea. They inflicted the penalty on him and severed his blood vessels. From his blood, he, Ea, created mankind, on whom he imposed the service of the gods and set the gods free."
And then it says, "After the wise Ea had created mankind and had imposed the service of the gods upon them, that task is beyond comprehension. The gods were then divided, all the Anunnaki, into upper and lower groups. He assigned 300 in the heavens to guard the decrees of Anu and appoint them as a guard." Tablet 6.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh, that's amazing, yeah.
I mean, it just tells you right there. And Billy, I'm sure you know that same description is almost referenced exactly in the Atrahasis as well. Isn't that just mind-boggling with all these questions that people have?
It's amazing that the Atrahasis epic and this have so many similar verses in them. So it tells you that it's right on point. It's really amazing. And the thing that I like about the Enuma Elish is the fact that it mentions the Anunnaki, it mentions Marduk or the Nibiru planet, and depending on the version that you're reading. And you can find Marduk in the modern day Bible. You can find him in the Torah. You can find these names Jewish American Library. So it's not even been hidden. It's there, but people have just never paid attention to it.
Well, let's try to have people understand. They might not know these names. So Ea, that's mentioned directly in this translation that we read, his name originally was known as Ea before he came here, and then his title was then changed to Enki. Okay, now so Enki, I'm just going to refer to him as Enki. That was his later name. But Enki is the one that is credited in every single ancient text, except some of these other versions that were later rewritten, as being the creator of mankind. And he was said to be this great being that created mankind to do the workload of the gods. And actually, the phrase I like even more, if you go read the Atrahasis, which those translations are in the Stage of Time, is the phrase that it gives in the Atrahasis is even better. It says, they created mankind specifically for the role of to do the role of the gods, but it says the phrase, to undo the chain to set them free. Undo the chain to set them free. Now, I want to tell you what I think about that, and then maybe you can mention what you think, Billy. But I believe that references the chain of the physical reality of the third dimension and being mortal. I think the beings used the human race as a way to achieve immortality, and also probably to achieve a non-physical existence here, where they could go into upper dimensions and basically rule over us because we exist in a lower state of awareness than they do. And then you can chime in, but I want to also mention is that, well, who is Marduk? Because we brought that up. Marduk is credited as being the first son of Enki, Ea. And so this competition arose between these younger generation gods and the older generation gods over competing here on who could rewrite everything, who could become the savior, who could become the great god here. And that's what this competition has been over and over and over again. And that's why Billy and I try to fight so hard to try to get the most accurate information, because it's a battle of information, and it's a battle of understanding the truth, right, Billy?
Oh, it's a big battle. I mean, even I just made a post on Instagram about the fact that Marduk, also known as Amun-Ra, is responsible for the defacing of a lot of these statues and these hieroglyphs around Egypt. And a lot of people got immediately offended, and they're really going crazy on the comment feed. When I get off of this show with you, I'm going to check my comments. It's going to be real hectic, because people don't want to come to terms with the fact that this was done in deep antiquity. I've been to Egypt. I've seen the thousands upon thousands of defaced gods and the hieroglyphs. I'm talking about temples with glyphs, probably I would say 200,000-300,000 glyphs in one temple, all chipped away. Faces of all of the statues broken off. And these go way back further than Napoleon. They want to say Napoleon went and shot the noses off, and people didn't want people to know that there were some black people in Egypt. No. Amun-Ra, also known as Marduk, is the one who had this done. Because why? Because he wanted to be known as the one and true only God, the same term that actually made it into modern day Bible. These guys had big egos. I mean, big egos, man. And they were battling each other consistently to be the one to do this and the one to do that. And matter of fact, if you look in the modern day Bible, look at the book of Deuteronomy, and especially when you figure out that the word God in the Bible is mistranslated with God's singular, it's supposed to be God's plural, everywhere in the entire Bible. Yeah. It was purposefully done. In the book of Deuteronomy, you have these gods who are Marduk and his cousins and his nephews and everybody else fighting each other and sending humans across to another area where people they don't know, never met before, to battle them, to rob and rape and steal and everything else. These are the actual words used in the modern day Bible: rape, kill, murder, and so forth, and they were battling each other using humans as cattle, kind of like we do today. We take somebody out of school, we send them halfway around the world, put them in the military, tell them to go blow up a guy on a camel so he can get a free education. But it's a mind trick we played on the people now. So they've got these gods doing the same thing today as they did in ancient times. But it's really amazing how they wanted to be able to take claim for everything. And you see it passed down to the pharaohs. The pharaohs, they take claim for a tomb that wasn't theirs. They would take claim for a pyramid that they didn't really build. They take claim for anything because they want to have that. They want to have that reputation that added to their bio.
That legacy, right?
Yeah, that legacy is crazy.
And that's what it really comes down to.
Our immediate cousins right behind us, to me, were much smarter than us. Just based off of what I've read and researched, they're probably more not maybe technologically smarter. That's potentially they were, but I think that they were more smarter spiritually, more in tune with nature, more in tune with the Schumann resonant frequency of the earth. They were using the magnetite crystals in their brains. They may have even been telepathic. They may have had more DNA connected to the avatar system. Right now, we have this quote unquote junk DNA, which is not really junk, it's disconnected. We've been disconnected from the higher realms and higher levels by these Anunnaki people to keep us a little bit more dumbed down. Our brains, our pineal glands are probably shrunk a little bit smaller than our immediate cousins, and making us into this Homo sapiens sapien being right now that we're in, this new biological avatar. They've got us in a way where they've kind of put a cap on us, literally. They put a cap on us physically with their telomere caps, and then they put a cap on us literally. People who don't know what telomeres are, on the end of chromosome number 2, scientists, geneticists discovered that chromosome number 2 was fused together, taken out, fused together, and a cap was put on each end, and these caps are like buffer material of genetic information. So every time that your cells and DNA replicate, nothing gets lost in translation. However, these buffer caps run out of material. And what's interesting is when you go to the biblical account of the Tower of Babel, you discover that human beings were working together on one accord to build this tower to the heavens. And whether it was a space tower, or whether it was a cargo cult type of a tower mimicking what the Anunnaki or these Atlantean people had built, or whether it was just a tower that they came together, decided to build this tower, doesn't really matter. What happens is Enlil, who's known as Yahweh in the modern day Bible, he comes back and realizes the humans are getting too smart. They're getting too intelligent. I mean, this is crazy. He even says out of his own mouth, no matter what they set their mind to do, they can achieve it. So he says at that point, first he destroys the tower, then he says, my seed shall not abide in man forever. So we were living for a very, very long time back then. This is well documented though. It's written about, and a lot of ancient civilizations talk about the fact that human beings were living for many hundreds and sometimes thousands of years. He said, my seed shall not abide in man forever. His years shall be 120. Well, Harvard scientists just recently discovered 2 years ago that under the most pristine conditions, a human being can only live to 120 years, backing up ancient texts with modern science. And then they discovered these telomere caps, and they discovered how to stop the telomere caps from shrinking in mice. So they then had mice living 3 times their normal lifespan with this new technique that they use on telomeres, which means that they can then now do it on human beings as well. So that the possibility for us to live for hundreds of years or even thousands of years is well within reach of modern science at this particular moment. But again, the scientists, like I said earlier, were saying that they don't know who did this, but it happened about 200,000 years ago. This is all really coming together, the culmination of science, modern science backing up these ancient tablets, adding more credence to what we're talking about, and really adding, right now, giving us the evidence that we need to talk about these topics and bring it to everybody out in the world.
That's right. It was really well said, Billy, and I couldn't agree more. It's, if you think about it as why would that need to be done, right? So if you were, let's call you an overlord of human civilization, if human beings could live for hundreds of years, if not more than 1,000 years, think about how much knowledge you could obtain in that amount of time. Think about how much fundamentally you could change and reach these higher states and all of this. So it was realized that, well, it'd be a lot easier to prevent that by just making so they would only die at a certain age, which actually, if you look at the potential of what the Emerald Tablet says and the Sumerian King List and the others about how long even humans or other beings could potentially live, 120 years is like a little, it's like a little flick of your fingers is actually nothing if you look at how far back time goes and how long these civilizations ruled for and all these things. And you brought up those great points, is that here we have scientists that are verifying that these things occurred to our DNA a certain amount of years ago. And you're getting the same cuneiform tablets that then back them up by not only saying that human civilization was created at the same time, and then showing the long reigns of these great bloodline kings, proving that human beings also lived longer. Then you see the destruction of all of that and how we had to restart over again, and then the human lives became less and less over time to where we got now. I think that you see all these shows where they talk about the telekinesis abilities of certain special individuals and all of this stuff, and you read the Emerald Tablets and a lot of these ancient texts as well, and they all clearly state that human beings used to have all these gifts, all these abilities, and live a long time. And all of those things were taken away from us to prevent a lot of those changes that were occurring, to keep us in this this never-ending loop of what I feel is that we essentially live this life, we expel all the energy until we're done, and then we have to do it all over again, over and over and over again. And that's that chain. I think that's that chain that undid the chain that allowed them to be free was essentially making us be the ones that do that life that they used to have to do. Having to live another life again and do it all over again and have to grow up again and learn everything. They essentially achieved immortality and were able to rise above that, whereas we're stuck. Not only do we not know the truth, but we're kept in this paradigm as almost like mental slaves, when you say, Billy?
Absolutely. I mean, you hit it right on the head. We're literally trapped in this this spiritual cycle as well, So once the avatar body has broken down and dilapidated and decides to die, and then your spirit is released back into the universal consciousness, it then becomes recycled right back into the system again. The Anunnaki, these Atlantean people, they had discovered a way to surpass this recycling. And they've also discovered a way to, Thoth talks about consciously incarnating at will. They also talked about having these avatar bodies on standby in regeneration chambers, which I'm sure Earth wasn't just the only place that they had. When they had one in the halls of Amenti, which was discovered, I talk about it in my book, underneath the Great Pyramid. It extends about a mile out underneath the Giza Plateau, hundreds of rooms down there, exactly what Thoth said they were, where they would put a body in and leave the body in there, a human body or avatar body, because it wasn't exactly a human, because he said that while one body was basically being recharged, he would walk amongst men in another body, but walk amongst men, but unlike a man. So they were creating these avatars. And what have we now discovered in modern science? We can take literally a skin cell off of your body. We can then put it in a laboratory condition and turn that skin cell into a stem cell. Then we can grow that stem cell into an entire clone of you. And now with the technology we have, now that we have these DNA hard drives, and some of the technology being developed at DARPA and also at the 2045 project by Ray Kurzweil in Russia, we can transfer consciousness, like Thoth talks about transferring his consciousness into avatars. We can do it now in modern times. So in the future, it's potentially going to come to be that you'll transfer your consciousness into an avatar body that came
before you die.
Before you die.
So that you can then transfer it over and then you can have that, regain all that, right?
Exactly. You don't lose anything. You just go into another body. And Thoth says he had done this 100 times 100. That's 100,000 years. Just
imagine that. Stop there for a second, Billy. He says he's done that not a couple times, and not even 100 times. He's done it 1,000 times. He's lived 1,000 times, and while his body recharged.
It's crazy.
So we're talking about history that we have to completely try to readjust our understanding of how far back time goes and how far back all of this information goes. We're living in this little glimpse of what used to be long ago. And I think what you said is spot on. One of the things I include in the Stage of Time is a God chart at the end, because including for Thoth. And I just wanted to show that because we're talking about it. But in here, I included some question marks in Sumer, because it's, when you trace back Thoth and you trace back some of these incarnations to like Hermes and then long before, you find out, well, how far back did these beings incarnate? Who were they originally? And do we have to completely look at all of these, what we perceived as gods, but also we perceived as these great leaders and these great wisdom bringers? We have to really relook at, who are they? Are they maybe an incarnation of another great teacher from long ago? And I think, Billy, that is going to lead us perfectly into Atlantis, because when we're talking about this birthplace of civilization, okay? And I want to just lay that out there before we get into Atlantis so we can keep this timeline going. The Sumerian king lists in the Eridu Genesis, and along with all the other things we're talking about with the evidence from ice cores, they support that these civilizations were well over 10,000 years ago. In fact, the Sumerian king list would support that they were more likely 200,000 years ago. And what is important about that is it gives us a time frame to then work with. So then after these civilizations emerged out of Mesopotamia, if you go with what the actual evidence says, it makes the most logical sense that then the grand civilization that was created, that we think of as a global civilization, was what was known as Atlantis. And that was this global maritime civilization that reached all the way around the world and connected to all this evidence. And that's why you see so many common traits that we're going to go over throughout the show all over the world. Now, So if Atlantis is the birthplace of where this great global civilization emerged, then it would mean that it has the most amount of ancient wisdom of any civilization that's ever existed, because it was around the longest amount of time with the most amount of knowledge that was freely available. Because as Billy has stated, this whole restarting of civilization and it's the battling of the gods, both second and first generation, meant that information was being fought over, held, concealed, destroyed, rewritten and tampered with to confuse everybody. So, but back then it wasn't like that. Back then, that information was pure, and that's what Thoth was trying to preserve. So civilization that emerged out and became Atlantis, this great global civilization, its greatest priest was known as Thoth. And that's where all of this comes from. So Thoth had all the knowledge of Atlantis, and he, because he was a master alchemist, he created what is known as the Emerald Tablets out of this indestructible material, so that that knowledge that existed from the very beginning, describing everything from where it started, could be preserved. But not only that, is those teachings that could help us ascend to reach that higher level, that walkthrough guide for reaching the highest state you can. That's what this is. And so what Billy and I are going to be doing that's going to be special is we're going to be dual reading Emerald Tablet number 1, which brings all of this in for the first time, so we can understand the importance of where all this came from. Okay, so I'm going to start. Emerald Tablet number 1 starts by saying, I, Thoth, the Atlantean, master of mysteries, keeper of records, mighty king, magician, living from generation to generation, being about to pass into the halls of Amenti, set down for the guidance of those who came from after, those records of the mighty wisdom of great Atlantis.
In the great city of Kior, on the island of Unveil, in the great time far past, I began this incarnation. Not as the little men of the present age did, the mighty ones of Atlantis live and die, but rather from eon to eon did they renew their life in the halls of Amenti, where the river of life flows eternally onward.
100 times 10 have I descended the dark way that led into light, and as many times have I ascended from the darkness into the light, my strength and power renewed. Now for a time I descend, and the men of Chem shall know me no more.
But in a time yet unborn I will rise again, mighty and potent, requiring an accounting of those left behind me. Then beware, O men of Chem, if ye have falsely betrayed my teaching, for I shall cast ye down from your high estate into the darkness of the caves from where ye hence came.
Remember and heed my words, for surely I will return again, and require of thee that which ye guard. Even from beyond time and from beyond death will I return, rewarding or punishing, as ye have required your trust.
Great were my people in the ancient days, great beyond the conception of the little people now around me. Knowing the wisdom of old, seeking far within the heart of infinity, knowledge that belonged to the earth's youth. Wise we were with the wisdom of the children of light who dwelt among us. Strong were we with the power drawn from the eternal fire.
And of all these, greatest among the children of men was my father, Thothme, keeper of the great temple, link between the children of light who dwelt within the temple and the races of men who inhabited the 10 islands. The dweller of Unal, speaker of the king to the kings, with a voice that must be obeyed.
Grew I there from a child into manhood, being taught by my father the elder mysteries, until in the time grew within the fire of wisdom, until it burst into a consuming flame. Naught desired I but the attainment of wisdom, until on a great day command came from the dweller of the temple that I be brought before him. Few there were among the children of men who had looked upon the mighty face and lived. For not as the sons of men are the children of light when they are not to incarnate in the physical body.
Chosen was I from the sons of men, taught by the dweller, so that his purpose might be fulfilled. Purpose is yet unborn in the womb of time. Long ago I dwelt in the temple, learning ever and yet ever more wisdom, until I, too, approached the light emitted from the great fire.
Taught me he the path to Amenti, the underworld where the great king sits upon his throne of might. Deep I bowed in homage before the lords of life and the lord of death, receiving my gift, the key of life. Free was I of the halls of Amenti, bound not by death to the circle of life. Far to the stars I journey until space and time became the naught.
Then, having drunk deep of the cup of wisdom, I looked into the hearts of men, and there I found the great mysteries and was glad. For only in the search for truth could my soul be stilled, with the flame would within be quenched. Down through the ages I lived, seeing those around me taste of the cup of death and return again into the light of life.
Amazing.
It's so powerful, Billy. I want to just put my thoughts on that for a second, and then I want you to chime in and we'll just talk about this for a minute. So to start, what you just heard is part of tablet number 1 that was handed down as part of the Emerald Tablets of this ancient wisdom. Now, this wasn't being read, as you can tell, in Atlantis. It was being read in Egypt, because he talks about the men of Chem in it. That means that when Atlantis was being destroyed, Thoth and his trusty masons and priests and those who were around him, they all fled Atlantis, this island subcontinent that was considered this principal island subcontinent of 7 circular islands with this large central landmass in the middle called Undal. Okay, and the central city on Undal was known as Kior, and that's where Thoth says he was born in this life, and then he was raised until he became a very wise priest. And so they fled Atlantis to create this new civilization in Egypt, and that's where he was essentially is reading and providing this knowledge to the men of Chem.